So let's look at some of the better, let's look at 5-4 suited next. Because it's the lowest suited connector, if there's any hand that's going to be a bluff raise against this player, 5-4 suited is. Against a player who limp shoved more and folded more, a hand like 3 deuce offsuit might be a better bluff because it's weaker, and if it's playing for a pot less often, then the benefit of being suited and connected might not be as much. But against this player, I think 5-4 suited is the best bluff. So it's going to be interesting to see whether we should be bluffing at all from an EV standpoint against this player. So let's get started. 5-4 suited, 0.81. I'll try to go quickly. So it's 40.5% equity. Suitedness and connectedness makes a very big difference in how playable a hand is. They make the strongest hands compared to making top pair with a good kicker. Like a straight or a flush is much more powerful. Is much stronger than top pair with a good kicker or 2-pair or trips. And so they tend to capture quite a lot more than their equity. So it's hard to make a guess, but 40.5%. I'm actually going to guess that it gets around around 10%. It is true that it makes weak hands. That's probably a little bit too much. Like I said, there are more precise ways of doing this, and if people are interested, I might do that, show that in another video, but for now I'm doing it the very rough way. But I think even with this very rough way of doing things, you can still get some pretty interesting results. Just to make it negative 0.212. Shoving is negative 0.21. Like I said, it doesn't seem like bluff shoving is going to be a good idea against this player. I think that's a mistake people make, is when they're looking at these things, they say, oh, well, it's 0.79 big blinds better than folding. That's a really good result. But you're not folding, you're checking back, and you're checking back with a very, very playable hand. So even though it's technically a bluffing hand, it's actually a very, it checks back for a very respectable amount. It might not be quite this much. I may have overestimated it. It's hard to say. But it still checks back for quite a lot. Anyway, now we just need to check its ISO not all in capture factor. So in terms of equity, 2.15. So it's got 40% equity. As you can see, the equity usually doesn't really go down in the ISO not all in pot with your bluffs. And like I mentioned before, I do expect it to capture more in the ISO'd pot because people play as if you have a stronger hand than you actually will. So we've got 47.5. So that gives us. So you can see what a big difference this made. I'll indent these to make the space bigger. It might seem like it's a little bit pulled out of its hat. That I just typed in some numbers and I said, hey, look, this one turned out better. But I actually kept the gap between the ISO'd pot and the checked back pot the same. In both of them, I gave the hand an extra 3.75% in the ISO'd pot compared to the compared to the checked back pot. So as long as you accept that having a suited hand adds a certain amount of capture factor, which I think you should, this is a pretty reasonable conclusion to draw. I think a lot of people aren't aware that suited hands really are just better for raising not all in against players who call a lot. which includes some regs and quite a lot of recreationals. On the other hand, if you're playing someone who folds and shoves a lot, then it becomes the opposite way. You want to check back more of your suited hands and use your offsuit hands for bluffs. So we have 5-4 suited as non-all-in raise. It is a bit of a question whether these. I'm going to have these as non-all-in raises too. It's going to be close. They get weaker, which benefits them raising as a bluff, but they do lose a bit of connectivity, which benefits checking back. So overall, I think these hands in particular are going to be like very close between raising and checking back. But it is a good idea to have some bluffs. So just like if it's indifferent, you might as well make your range more balanced. And so I'm going to include these hands as bluffs. Something like this. There. This isn't perfect, but I think it's reasonably close. Maybe I'll leave that as a check back. There we go. Actually, I shouldn't fill this in yet. One of the things about them calling all is that, like I said, being suited and connected makes a big difference. So I should check these suited connected middling hands. And they're a good hand to raise for balance so that you have some kind of a hand on middling boards. So let's do 7-8 suited next. So checking back, 0.93. So 46.5% equity. Last time we gave 5-4 suited 8.75% extra capture factor. I think it's pretty reasonable to give that to 8-7 suited too. Maybe a little bit more actually. I'm just gonna give it. No, 8.75 should be fine. So 50.25. So it's basically just 0. I guess, if I'm being technical. Alright, DV of shoving, just for completion, it actually does pretty decent as a shove. So it could be a shove, if we want to include some bluffs in our shoving range. Alright, now for ISOing not all in. 8-7 suited, 2.34. Again, if you can't, I'm doing it pretty quickly, but just, I go to here, I read the number off, so I see 2.34. And then I plug it into here to see what its equity is. Because it's 2.34 divided by the total size of the pot. So its equity is 43.3%. And then we go over here, we put the equity in. We take off the 5% for being out of position. And then we add some amount because it's a type of hand that our opponent isn't going to play against as much. As in, they'll be playing against ace-x and king-x and pocket pairs and strong hands like that. But if they'll be playing as if we don't have very many 8s or 7s in our range. I think last time I had a 3.75% for 5-4 suited. I think it's pretty reasonable to add the same amount for 7-8 suited. It's less of a bluffing hand, but it's more unexpected in our range. So I think those two cancel each other out a little bit. So that gives us 12.5%, so 50.8. It did actually lose quite a bit more equity this time than 5-4 suited did. So I'm going to make it 13. Breaking my rule of using increments of 1.25%. Sorry, so that's 51.3. So it gives us 0.06. So a very close not-all-in ISO. So for now, actually, it looks like ISOing not-all-in with suited connectors against this type of player is going to be good. And for balance reasons, these are going to be indifferent. So for now, we're going to actually I'm going to leave indifferent hands blank. There. I think this is probably pretty fair. I'm going to leave indifferent hands blank, and then we can worry about what to do with them at the end, which is what I said I was going to do earlier, but I kind of fell off the rails. I shouldn't. I don't know that these are checks yet. Something like this is what we have a good idea of. Yeah, let's try king deuce suited, see how that does. King deuce suited, 1.06. It is important to note with this, so that's 53% equity. So because a lot of its value comes from having a high card, I wouldn't expect it to gain as much as 5 deuce suited, for example, because basically a lot of this equity already is kind of low quality equity, low quality king high equity, even though it is suited. So let's see. For 5-3 off, we had it at 0. King deuce suited. Suited is like, in terms of its value, I think it's in between being a one gapper like 5-3 off and a connector like 5-4 off. So it's like a little bit more. The suitedness makes it a little bit, gives a little bit more playability than 5-3 off being a one gapper. But 5-3 off didn't have king high. So I think minus 3.75 seems about right, which gives us negative 0.12. And as a jam, I'm just going to move this. Oops. There we go. It makes so it's not quite a jam. It's closer than I thought it would be. And it'll look at HUSNG not all in. 2.78. So we've got 51.5. So it lost a little bit of equity, but not much. The awkward thing about king deuce suited is they do put you on having a king pretty often, as I've said many times before. But I am trying to look at high card, low card hands in general, including like jack deuce suited and queen deuce suited, so I'm going to kind of ignore that this time. Basically, their range gets a little bit more playable, but we can bluff a little bit. Even with, we can turn a king high into a bluff a little bit. So I'm going to leave the factor changing as the same as it was before. So negative 3.75. So overall, it gives it 43%. Negative 0.21. All right. Yeah, so it looks like checking it back is going to be best. It's pretty fair to do something like this. At a certain point, it can become a value raise, so we don't want to get too. We don't want to write off too many king x. Let's try king 6 suited next, just to kind of double check. King 6 suited, 1.13. .5, and it does become a little bit more playable when its kicker goes up. It makes slightly stronger top pairs, and its bottom pairs become slightly stronger. And it can also make a few more one-card straights. So I'm going to give that. That's what I've decided on. 49.75. So that makes it negative 0.01. King 6 is 2.97. 0.55, so it goes from 56.5 to 55, the 1.5% drop again. And again, I'm going to have it lose a little bit, just because people don't really expect to see sixes, maybe. So 48.75%. Since it's a semi, I'm going to leave it at this, so 48.25%. As we go over here, negative 0.04. So it actually did get a little bit closer, just because the strength of the hand went up. Yeah. And then shoving, king 6 suited actually does. So king 6 suited is actually a close shove according to this. I think it's because the villain's range that I put in, which I think is accurate to regs, does tend to be a little bit heavy in the low ace-x and the low pocket pairs. And as a result, just to bring up that kicker helps a lot against like pocket threes or ace 4 off or whatever that they limp and then call shove with. So I think that this is a pretty reasonable result. Since it's very close with everything, I should leave it blank. I guess I can leave king 5 suited blank as well. And I guess for completion, let's do one more kind of in the middle hand. Jack 4 suited. So this time it doesn't make as much from having a high card. It does have an okay kicker, so I'm going to leave it at 0. Give it 42.5. So it makes it negative 0.15. .4 44.4%. It actually lost a lot. It lost like 3%. I'll leave it at 44.4. And I guess I'll, since this is a bit more of a bluff, I guess I'll do 1.25%. Maybe, I don't know, just to make it a bit less, just to be a bit safe, I'll give it 2.5%, just to kind of protect against, I think it'll probably be a check back anyway, a close one, so this kind of accounts for some errors in the process. So 41.9%. Negative 0.25. And shoving, just negative 0.26. So it's a check back. Alright, so we can be pretty happy with this. Now we need to check some thin value suited hands to finish things off. Basically, we want to see around where the hands become value raises. For king 6 suited, so for the suited king x, it looks like king 7 suited is probably about indifferent, and then king 8 suited and above should be raises. So what happens here? And king 10 suited plus heart calls. Yeah, let's try to check it for the queens. So 54% equity. It's pretty playable equity. Some of it comes from queen high, but on the other hand, a lot of it comes from having a pair of queens with a decent kicker, or a pair of eights with a good kicker, and it's suited and connected. I guess I'll give it plus 3.75. That might be a bit high. 2.5 is about right, I think. So 51.5%. So it's plus 0.03. Queen 8 suited, 2.88. I think this might be getting a little bit tedious, so maybe I'll skip ahead after this. So 53.3%. And I'm going to leave it the same, I think. It's a semi-thought. I guess I'll give it a slight bump. So 52%. .09. And it can shove for 0.04. So it looks like Queen 8 suited is probably around where it starts raising for value, and it's Queen 10 suited plus the call off the shove. I'm going to assume Jack 8 suited follows the same pattern. It's a little bit rough, but I don't want to bore you guys too much. What was it? I think something like this. Yeah, Jack 9 suited. I guess you can call it off since this is already a pretty strong range. So it'd be more likely for them to be weaker than for them to be stronger. So raise calling off like this is probably fine. And I guess, yeah, can leave these blank, can leave these blank. So this video is getting pretty long, so I'm going to cut it off for now. And if people are interested in more, I can finish this up and fill in the rest of this. So yeah, I hope you found this interesting. I hope it helps, and good luck at the tables.